New Orleans Saints defensive coordinator Dennis Allen is widely considered the in-house favorite to be the New Orleans Saints' next head coach. Let's talk about why and the other competition around him. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Dat Nation and Dat family? Welcome into today's episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks as always for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. And don't forget that we're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, Canal Street Chronicles, Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And today's episode is dedicated to Dennis Allen and a couple of other in-house candidates for the New Orleans Saints head coaching job. But we're going to start off with Dennis Allen because Dennis Allen is widely considered the in-house favorite for the position moving forward, the heir apparent for Sean Payton. And I have to say, I completely agree. You're not going to get any qualms from me around it. So let's talk about why. And we're going to split this up, right? We're going to extend this topic a little bit because I want to start off with the first why being his presence in the institution, his sort of stature within the institution, all of that. And then we're going to talk about what he brings schematically that's so unique that also makes it to where the New Orleans Saints should just benefit from keeping him around, period. So let's start off with the institutional portion of all of this because Dennis Allen arrived in New Orleans in a critical year, 2006, the same time as Sean Payton, Drew Brees, so on and so forth. He was part of the staff that was put together by Sean Payton. He went to the Senior Bowl that year and started to kind of pick around and try to find some folks and everything like that. And they were able to bring Dennis Allen to New Orleans at the time. He was actually the assistant defensive line coach. He hadn't yet moved in to defensive assistant or even secondary work just yet, but he would start off in 2016 with Payton as that assistant defensive line coach. Pretty much the next year, they ended up moving him up to where he started, around to where he started working with secondary defensive backs, all of that. Now, he spent a little bit more time in New Orleans throughout that tenure before leaving to take over as a defensive coordinator in Denver, and then he would quickly become the head coach of the Oakland Raiders from 2012 to 2014. As we know, those 3 seasons or 2 seasons and a few games didn't go great for Dennis Allen. He went 8-28 over the course of that time and then ended up being relieved of his duties. He then rejoined the New Orleans Saints in 2015, very quickly being promoted to interim defensive coordinator in place of the absolute disaster that was Rob Ryan in New Orleans. Some historically bad defenses, 2014 and the beginning of 2015 before Dennis Allen took over. And at that point, moving forward, Dennis Allen simply thrived in that position. So that's a little bit of the background in terms of how Dennis Allen got to this point. There are 3 things that I want to highlight. The first of which is head coaching experience. No, it didn't go great for him as a part of the then Oakland Raiders, right? The head coach there. But he has since had 6-7 years to mature, grow, learn, change, all of that under Sean Payton, of all people, as a head coach. And is definitely going to be a different head coach if he gets this opportunity in New Orleans than he was in, at that time, Oakland, now the Las Vegas Raiders. Point number 2 here is that Dennis Allen showed up at one of the most pivotal times in the New Orleans Saints franchise history all time in 2006. That was when this team was starting to, try to come back and sort of revitalize, rebirth, if you will, when it came to recovering from Hurricane Katrina, which had hit just the season before. They had been displaced that entire season. People didn't want to go to New Orleans. There were 10 head coaching positions open at that time. The Saints rolled the dice on a young Sean Payton, and Sean Payton ended up establishing the new culture of winning in New Orleans, became the coach of the year, all that. Dennis Allen was there. He was a part of the culture building staff at that time. The third part that I want to point out is 2017. Dennis Allen was there in 2015 when this defense was bouncing back from being historically one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and he led a bounce back on the defensive side, completely changing the way that defensive football was received in the city of New Orleans, to the point to where by the time that you got to 2021, the defense was winning them games, and people were saying, no worries about who's under center. That defense can win this game, can win this team all the way to the playoffs. That is a humongous culture change. Those are two of the most pivotal moments in franchise history. The culture change of 2006 and the culture change of 2007, coming out of the down years of 2017, coming out of the 3 down years of 2014, 15, and 16. Dennis Allen, a part of all of that, plus that head coaching experience. And finally, to wrap up here, before we talk about what he brings to the field and why you want to keep him around simply schematically as well, the biggest thing around here is that when you look at those 2014, 15, 16 seasons and what Dennis Allen inherited versus what he turned this defense into, let's lay it out. Let's look at 2015 and 16 after he took over and look at them as a scoring defense as well as a total defense in terms of total yards and points allowed. They were 32nd in points allowed, 31st in total yards allowed in 2015. 2016, they were 31st and 27th in those same metrics. Now let's talk about 2017 through 2021. The years that the New Orleans Saints completely shifted their culture, and when the personnel on the roster started to reflect the vision of Dennis Allen's defense and Sean Payton's team. 2017, that defense jumped up to 10th in scoring, 17th in yards. 2018, 14th and 14th respectively in both. In 2019, 13th in scoring, 11th in total yards. And here's where the big jump happens. 2020, 5th in scoring, 4th in total yards. 2021, 4th in scoring, 7th in total yards. Dennis Allen changed the way that football looked in New Orleans, just like Sean Payton changed the way it looked starting back in 2016. And Dennis Allen was a part of game planning against Sean Payton over and over and over again in practice, all of that, getting his guys ready. Iron sharpens iron, everything, right? You had 2 phenomenal play callers on each side of the field going up against one another on a daily basis. That's how Dennis Allen got better. And that's why Dennis Allen is the in-house favorite for the New Orleans Saints heading into this coaching cycle. It's weird to talk about the New Orleans Saints in this situation for the first time since 2006. But let's not just talk about his history with the franchise. Let's talk about what he's done on the field, what it is that he brings, and why you don't want to lose it, and why head coach might be the perfect spot for him. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. But before we get to that, I want to make sure that you have what you need, which is what is about to be your favorite app. Get Upside. It's the app that pays you money for filling up at the gas station. Gas prices are insanely high right now, and thanks to the Get Upside app, you never have to pay full price at the pump ever again. Just go to your Google Play, App Store, wherever it is that you get your apps. Download this free app, Get Upside, and don't forget to use the promo code Touchdown so you can get 25 cents back per gallon or more on your first fill up. Some folks that are using this app are getting $200, $300 back per month because the app gives you cash back for every gallon when you fill up at select gas stations. You can go ahead and have that deposited whenever you want directly to your bank account, to PayPal, or you can go ahead and get yourself some Amazon gift cards or other brands as well. So go and grab the app right now. There's no catch here. It's the Get Upside app, and don't forget that promo code Touchdown for 25 cents back per gallon or more on your first fill up. It's the Get Upside app, and don't forget that promo code Touchdown. All right, Who Dat Nation, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, and thanks as always for making us here at Locked On Saints your first listen of the day. Don't forget that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. If you're listening on the podcast, make sure that you subscribe or follow depending upon what podcasting provider you are using. We just had the biggest day in Locked On Saints history, and I thank you so much. And I know a lot of it has to do with a lot of you new listeners, old listeners, people that have been here for a while, all wanting to know what the New Orleans Saints are going to do now that Sean Payton is no longer at the helm at head coach. And right now, the big name circling or going around many circles, in-house in particular, is Dennis Allen. We talked about his familiarity with the institution, his institutional knowledge, and what that brings to the game. Now, let's talk about what he literally brings to the game. There are 3 things that Dennis Allen should be known for when it comes to what he brings on the football field, and I think they all translate very well to the head coaching spot. And that's one of the reasons why, obviously, he is one of the favorites, but why I believe, for me, he's one of the favorites there as well. So the three sort of big things for me are his innovation, his development, and of course, his schematics, right? He is a very exotic, he creates a lot of very exotic defensive looks. So let's start there. Let's talk about the schematic portion of all of this. When you look for a head coach, you're looking for a genius. You're looking for a football genius, right? Doesn't matter if it's on the offensive side or the defensive side, you're looking for somebody that understands the game. And a good defensive mind understands the offenses that he's going up against, which means he's also a good offensive mind. It's one of the reasons why I really like defensive-minded head coaches. And I know that the New Orleans Saints have built their entire brand since 2016 on offensive innovation, but when it comes to the head coach, you got to be able to do a little bit of both. And I think that Dennis Allen has demonstrated that there's enough that he understands, especially if a guy like Pete Carmichael hangs around as the offensive coordinator, because he was such a big part of what Sean Payton did schematically over the course of his 15 years as a head coach, particularly since 2009 when Pete Carmichael became the offensive coordinator. So if you have Dennis Allen taking over as head coach and you're able to retain Pete Carmichael as offensive coordinator, it sets you up to something that feels familiar, but that can be brand new at the same time. And Dennis Allen brings a lot of risk to his game. Let's talk about that over on the defensive side. And what I mean by that in terms of the exotic ways that he schemes up defenses, you see a lot of blitzing on third down. Some teams don't do that, right? Some teams are fine to do that on 3rd and long. Dennis Allen will do it on 3rd and 5. Dennis Allen will do it on 3rd and 4. He's going to bring CJ Gardner-Johnson and get him in your face. He's going to bring PJ Williams around the corner, get him in your face. He's going to scheme up some kind of a, blitz package or some type of a pre-snap look that's going to threaten your opposing offensive line into not knowing exactly where the pressure is going to come from. That type of unexpected, but still planned out, if that makes sense. It's unexpected on the offensive side, but obviously he's planning it out. Approach is a part of what is so fantastic about the New Orleans Saints defense. They confuse opposing offenses. And it's not just about what you do at the line of scrimmage, right? It's about what you do the furthest away from the line of scrimmage with your safeties sometime as well. The Saints do a wonderful job showing one look pre-snap, rolling into a different coverage post-snap. And when I talk about rolling into another coverage, I just mean that they might have two safeties deep before the ball is snapped, but then one safety will roll down into the box and either play coverage in the middle of the field, or perhaps he's going to come after the quarterback, for instance. And then the other safety that looked like was about to split and take over half the field will instead play center field, basically, and then try to cover sideline to sideline. One of the reasons why Marcus Williams is so incredibly important. And Dennis Allen could be one of the reasons that Marcus Williams wants to stick around in New Orleans if the Saints are able to keep him around. So that's the other piece of all this. So when you look at what it is that he brings to you schematically, game plan wise, he gives you an advantage, and he gives you an advantage in your division. If Tom Brady doesn't retire this offseason, the Bucs are going to be considered the favorite yet again in 2022, no matter who the Bucs lose in free agency. But Tom Brady's kryptonite, Dennis Allen. One of the things that you know about every single team in the NFL is that they are built to win within their division. That's how you get to the playoffs. And if your biggest competitor is going to be a player or a team that folds all the time to Dennis Allen's defense, keeping Dennis Allen around seems to make a lot of sense. And it also allows you to keep things in-house where everyone understands, hey, here's what always works. No need to change it, at least in that situation, right? That specific situation against Tom Brady. Like we mentioned, you're going to see things that are going to be different with Sean Payton not around. Everyone's going to make something their own as they move on into their approach. And that's what brings us to that other point of innovation, right? We talked about the way that Dennis Allen disguises defense, all of that, but the way that he innovates is something that is specific and something that, of course, means a lot to the New Orleans Saints, who have always been at the forefront of innovation. Look at the way that they've integrated technology into their practices to make sure that players aren't being overworked or overwhelmed. Their work with Zebra Technologies, their work with Next Gen Stats, like all of these different things that they do to make sure that they are using the most up-to-date technology to their advantage, taking care of themselves in terms of analytics, all of that. Dennis Allen would be right in line with that. And I think you learned that when you saw Dennis Allen take over the head coaching responsibilities for that game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, when he made some analytics-based decisions throughout that game. So there are those opportunities that present themselves presently all throughout what it is that the New Orleans Saints do, and you have a sort of comfort level in terms of how you're willing to approach that. If you're willing to operate within that comfort level, then things will end up remaining as status quo as they can. But if you're willing to innovate, then you have the opportunity to exceed expectations. And finally, that brings us to our last point, development. Sean Payton put together a team of remarkable development-focused coaches. You see it all around. You saw it with Aaron Glenn. You've seen it with Ryan Nielsen in the way that he has elevated the New Orleans Saints pass rush, defensive line, run defense, all of that. You see it with Chris Richard, who the Saints brought in to replace Aaron Glenn. You've seen it with Pete Carmichael over the course of time. CJ Johnson, right? Your coach, your wide receiver coach, right? The running backs coaches. I mean, you see it all over the place. The Saints' ability to develop talent isn't limited to just Sean Payton. Sean Payton is the figurehead who brought in all of the different coaches that also contribute from a developmental standpoint, and Dennis Allen is absolutely no exception to that. You look at how quickly Paulson Adebo caught on. You look at how quickly Marcus Williams righted his ship. You look at the development of Marcus Davenport over the course of his time, CJ Gardner-Johnson over the course of his time. You look at how quickly Pete Werner developed as well. Dennis Allen is a leader of men. This is what he does. He has the respect of endless amounts. You can ask anybody within the facility, whether it's a staffer, whether it's a front office person, whether it's a coach, whether it's a player. Everyone has respect for Dennis Allen. And so when you lead with that level of genius, that level of development, that level of innovation, by using the unexpected to your advantage, the unexpected on the other side of a head coaching change might be a little bit less scary. Now, Dennis Allen isn't the only in-house candidate that's going to get some attention here. He is the favorite. But let's talk about his competition within the building. Who are some of the other guys that might end up getting some opportunities there? We've got 2 defensive coaches and 1 offensive coach that should be getting some attention here as the New Orleans Saints search for their new leader at the helm. So we'll look at those candidates here in just a moment as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at betonline.ag, the fastest and easiest place to place all of your bets. They don't have them up right now, but keep an eye out on the website when it comes to the eventual Vegas odds around who will be the New Orleans Saints' next head coach. Expect Dennis Allen to top that list. But you can always take a look at all of the different props and fun stuff that you have going on around this weekend's games. For instance, will one of these games end in overtime? Will one of them end in a walk-off, score, touchdown, field goal, however it may be? You can bet on that. And of course, the over-under, the spread, whatever it is that you want to check out over at betonline.ag. And if you're not looking to bet on football, that's totally fine. You can get in on the action when it comes to basketball, hockey, MMA, UFC, or of course, all of your favorite Vegas casino games as well. So go and check them out over at betonline.ag. Don't forget to use the promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit with the promo code LOCKEDON over at BetOnline, where the game starts. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with more in-house candidates that should get at least an opportunity to have a conversation and make their pitch on why they should be the next head coach of the New Orleans Saints. Dennis Allen might be the favorite, but he's not alone in the facility for coaches that are capable of taking over the job. So let's talk about 3 more coaches, 2 on the defensive side, 1 on the offensive side. We'll run through these pretty quick because I kind of want to introduce them to you, and then we'll break them down in full episodes down the road, depending upon how long the head coaching search takes. This could potentially move quickly. It could take some time. The Senior Bowl is right around the corner. It's a perfect time to schmooze, network, find things out, see who's available, who's not, all of that. So we'll see what the timeline actually looks like. But let's go ahead and take a look at those other coaches around Dennis Allen in the facility, and we'll start with assistant head coach and defensive line coach Ryan Nielsen. Now, Ryan Nielsen joined the New Orleans Saints at a pivotal time, the 2017 season, that second big culture shift that we talked about that, of course, Dennis Allen was a part of. Now, he joined as the defensive line coach, and the New Orleans Saints liked him so much because of the way that he actually ended up impacting the New Orleans Saints defense that they went to battle, in a way. I'm over-exaggerating a little bit, but they kind of went to battle with the LSU Tigers, who intended to hire Ryan Nielsen away from the New Orleans Saints ahead of the 2021 season as their new defensive coordinator. And so the Saints ended up making him their assistant head coach, giving him a big old pay raise and keeping him in New Orleans. Now, why would they do that? Because he revitalized the defensive line, the run game, the pass rush, all of it in 2017 and on. Before 2017, in that 2016 season, New Orleans Saints had 30 sacks. It was 27th in the NFL that season. After Ryan Nielsen joined in 2017, the New Orleans Saints have never put up a sub 40 sack season. And yes, it includes the 17-game season in 2021, but they crossed the 40 sack threshold before that final game. So that's a big part of it. But it wasn't just the pass rush. It was the run defense as well. He revitalized the run defense in New Orleans, turning them into a consistent near top 5, top 7, top 10 run defense consistently over the course of that 2007 to 2017 to 2021 period. So gives you a lot of reason to look at him because, again, he's able to innovate, he's able to develop, and he's able to scheme. Those are things that you love and things that you look for, and he's a fantastic leader. He is notably highly, highly regarded not only in New Orleans, not only by the players, coaching staff, and the front office, but across the NFL as a whole, and clearly in the college coaching circuits as well. Now let's take a look at another defensive coach here, this time defensive backs coach Kris Richard. Now this one might take folks by surprise because Kris Richard's only been with the Saints for 1 year. He came in and replaced Aaron Glenn, but when you look at, again, those three keys of being able to scheme, being able to develop, and being able to innovate, you don't get a real sense of schematics when it comes to position coaching, but you get a great idea of development and innovation. And we saw the way that Paulson Adebo performed in his rookie season after not playing football for nearly 2 years between his final game at Stanford in 2019 and his first game against the reigning MVP in a neutral site showdown against the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers. You look at some of the things that Paulson Adebo did in this season. He forced a sub 100 passer rating, which is a very good mark for a rookie. 65% completion percentage, 4 interceptions when targeted as a rookie. In the meanwhile, he also helped Marshawn Lattimore put together one of his better seasons. 19 forced incompletions in 2021, first among qualifying cornerbacks at his position, of course, and in that metric. Ooh, that took a second to get out there. He also held opposing quarterbacks to 54.7% completion percentage when he was in primary coverage, and that doesn't even go for what he also did with guys like C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Marcus Williams, and then of course Malcolm Jenkins, the veteran as well. So you look at his ability as a respected developer, the way that players affix themselves to him. He doesn't have head coaching experience just like Ryan Nielsen, but he has former player experience. I believe it was Marshawn Lattimore told us all the way back in mini camps that there are times where he believes truly that he could see Aaron Glenn strap up, put on some pads, and go out there and scrap with them out on the football field. And players respect that kind of attitude. When Marshawn Lattimore told us that, a lot of us took that away and went, all right, we know Kris Richard is the real deal. And you kind of already knew that because you've seen the development elsewhere before. It's not specific to the New Orleans Saints. He also was, of course, the guy that is credited with leading the way as the position coach for that legendary Legion of Boom in Seattle for the Seattle Seahawks. Now, he's had a couple of stints at defensive coordinator, both with the Seahawks and the Dallas Cowboys, that went okay. So maybe Kris Richard is somebody that you actually look at more as a defensive coordinator replacement if Dennis Allen takes over the head coach spot, therefore vacating defensive coordinator. You can say the same thing for Ryan Nielsen, but I do think out of respect, both Ryan Nielsen and Kris Richard on the defensive side will get at least some opportunity to make their pitch for the head coach spot. Don't forget, too, that Kris Richard is also under consideration for at least one other position across the NFL. He was originally interviewed to be the potential defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. Yes, the Baltimore Ravens, but they have now hired their defensive coordinator. So the only job that Kris Richard has interviewed for, or has been asked to interview for, that is still open are the Pittsburgh Steelers. And finally, let's wrap up with our only offensive candidate here. And I'm going to go with offensive coordinator Pete Carmichael. Pete Carmichael has been the right-hand man to Sean Payton ever since he joined the team back in 2006. Now, remember when he joined the team in 2006, he was working as more of a position coach, but then in 2009, he was promoted up to offensive coordinator. But it's not just what he did as an offensive coordinator, it's what he's also done, wait for it, as a play caller. Don't forget, Pete Carmichael called basically the last 9 or 10 games of the 2011 season when Sean Payton tore his ACL and had to go up to the box, couldn't be on the sideline anymore. And so Pete Carmichael took over play calling responsibilities, and that was during the 7,474 yard, at the time, record-breaking historical total offense total that the New Orleans Saints put up in that season. And Pete Carmichael made his play calling debut in a near perfect game, beating the Indianapolis Colts. You remember this game, 62-7, a phenomenal win for the team. He would then go on to be 8-1 by the end of the season, helping the Saints get to the playoffs that year. An absolute shellacking against the Indianapolis Colts. He would also go on to call plays during the 2012 season, did well there too, put up another top-ranked offense, even though that season didn't go well for the Saints. That was a suspension year for Sean Payton. We've also seen Pete Carmichael call plays as recent as this year, that same game where Dennis Allen took over as the head coach. Pete Carmichael became the primary play caller on the offensive side for that game. So he understands the offense. He knows how to teach it. He knows how to install it. He knows how to communicate it. He knows how to execute it. And he knows how to teach players how to execute it. And he also knows how to change it. We've watched this New Orleans Saints offense take a bunch of different iterations and versions over the course of time, taking shots deeper downfield, to being more run focused and run heavy, to being a little bit more focused on the short to intermediate area and taking advantage of sort of a more surgical precision, death by paper cuts type of approach. We've watched them morph over time, and Pete Carmichael was a part of that. So not only does he know Sean Payton's vision, the intent for the New Orleans Saints is not to replicate Sean Payton's vision moving forward. It's about going into the next era. And Pete Carmichael has the ability to put his own stamp on what has already been proven to be successful in New Orleans, especially if he can get the right quarterback, which may or may not already be on the roster. And that is one of the big questions that we're going to have to continue to both ask and try to answer until an answer is apparent here on Locked On Saints, because we're not done breaking all of this down. No matter what happens in terms of an in-house candidate or an external candidate, the Saints are still going to have to solve the quarterback question as they move forward. So as we continue on and as we come back on Friday, let's have a little bit of a conversation about that before we dig really deeply into it. We'll set it all up before we knock it all down. What are the options at quarterback for the New Orleans Saints with Sean Payton having stepped away, and how does each of these potential in-house coaches end up impacting what the quarterback position might look like moving forward? We'll talk about that in tomorrow's episode, and we're also going to get a big preview of this weekend's action in the conference championship games. You won't want to miss that. As always, y'all, I thank you very much for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, check out the Locked On Bets podcast. Your boy Q, handicapping expert Lee Sterling. Win yourselves some money with your second listen today over at Locked On Bets, wherever you get your podcast. As always, for everything else that you need around the New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, just make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.